It's time to go over the last Excel deck that's going to be introduced in Standard, and that's none other than Narukami. Stand up! Vanguard! Hey card fighters, welcome back to another set review for Miyaji Academy Cardfight Club, and today we're going to talk about everything regarding to Narukami. And this is one of my favorite decks, and I know I've said it a couple times, but together with Gear Chronicle, Bill Moon and some regard New Nectar, Narukami has been one of my fan favorites in the G era, and I really love Vanquisha with this binding mechanic. And I was very curious if we would see this mechanic return in Standard. And we did! And in a very interesting way. They combined a lot of aspect of the different Narukami builds and put it in basically in one new deck, where we're going to bind stuff, but most importantly, from the front row, we get boosting power or some advantageous effect when our opponent has an empty front row or a not completely filled front row. And we're going to see a lot of card effects that interact with our opponent's front row and basically binding a lot of stuff. And throughout binding, we're going to get even more advantage effect. So without further ado, we got a lot of cards to go over, as seen as they not only got a lot of cards in the main set, but they also got a trial deck to boot. Starting off, we have of course the vanilla triggers, just like always, 2 stars, nothing really special. Let's move on. Alright, next up we got our starter, and that's Kid Dragoon, and just in the generic starter, I will give this one 4 star. Next up, we've got their vanilla, and that is River Dragoon. And personally, I'm not really that fond of the vanillas in Excel clans, in some Excel clans at least. But in this particular case for Narukami, I don't really like it that much, as seen as we need a lot of supporting cards that helps us with binding and a lot of other things that can help us to basically win the game. So for this card I want to give it 2 stars, and I don't think you're gonna run it. Alright, next up we've got our normal PG, and that is Lizard Soldier Ouhou, a generic PG, so I will give it 2 stars. And with PGs we also got the draw PG, and that is Wyvern Guld, a fan favorite for a lot, as seen as this card got the multiple versions also in the G era. But it's just a good draw PG for this time around, and I will give it 5 stars, as seen as it's an excellent card to run. Just like Oracle Think Tank, Narukami got also a new vanilla card, and it was in the form of Full Grade Foil Dragon, a 12k grade 2. And this is very interesting, just like the case for Oracle Think Tank. But for Axel, it's on a different part. For Oracle Think Tank, it was more on the defensive part. For Axel, this is an interesting on the offensive part side, as seen as Axel has a lot of issues against force when they have ridden to their grade 2 a turn before you do, and they have a 10k base power, and you basically have a vanilla grade 2 game that doesn't really do much anymore, and you cannot really hit them that easy. You need to force more cards on the field from your hand to even have some pressure on your grade 2 turn. That usually is a great upset for your end game. But with this card, that becomes suddenly a lot easier, as seen as you can now really easily hit them. And also they cannot easily hit you anymore, as seen as 12k. They need to either pop a grade 3 on the field, or they need to make a column, or they need to use a rear guard that's on a force marker. So it's an interesting aspect. I will give it 3 stars. I don't think it's gonna be very revolutionary, but just like Oracle Think Tank, I don't know for certain how this might impact the game. So I will give it, to be safe, I will give it 3 stars for now, but it might be lower on future releases as we've seen how they perform. We're going to start with Dragonic Kaiser Vermillion. They're grade 3, basically supporting grade 3, maybe an archetype, but this card has an interesting skill. Act, Vanguard Circle, once per turn, cost counterblast 2, and this unit get power plus 5k and a critical plus 1 until the end of turn. If there are 2 or more rearguards in your front row, instead of the critical plus 1, when this unit attacks, it battles all of the units in your opponent's front row in one attack. This is a little bit awkward in the way that Narukami is going to work for now, as seen as a lot of skills are going to use Counterblast, and you don't really have that luxury to use a skill like this to Counterblast too. But against Excel clans or against an opponent that goes wide on the board, it's very interesting to can basically field nuke the front row. But for 2 Counterblast, I will say you will only use this skill against another Exile player, not against Force of Protect, as since they only have 2 front row units, and for 2 counterblasts you can just bind them for the same cost, and you probably get even more value out of it than just a plus 5k on the Vanguard. And in my personal opinion, you're not really going to use the counterblast 2 to gain a crit, as that's really inefficient in my personal opinion. So I will give this card 3 stars for now. It would have been a lot better if it was also a rearguard skill. If this thing was on a rearguard skill, this was insane. But I don't think you really have room to run this thing in your main deck. Maybe as a tag option, or if you want to make an other kind of build. But in the main deck you're going to build with Narukami, I don't feel this card has a place right now. Alright, leading off the pack for the cards that can bind things, we're going to start off with Hammerknuckle Dragon. And his skill is Act Vanguard Rearguard Circle, Counterblast 2. Choose a rearguard in your opponent's front row, bind it, and this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of turn. Binding is fine, and it's really needed to also get 5k, but it's not worth the 2 counterblasts. It's really insufficient, and I will give it 2 stars for that. You can basically say, you can give it 1 star, as it's probably not that great at all, because it's really cost efficient. Alright, next up, we've got this great Zero, and his name is Elec Dragokid, and his skill is Auto Rearguard Circle. When an attack hits during the battle that it boosted, retire this unit, choose a rearguard in your opponent's front row and bind it. Alright, this is a lot better than Hammerknuckle Dragon, as since it doesn't cost any counterblast, but it costs you a rearguard, and it needs to be hitting when the unit is boosted. Only since it's only 5k grade nil, it's not really that great. It doesn't really give that much power to your pressure column. Also, losing a rearguard isn't already that great, and also the hit skill is also really that great. But it does state that it just need to hit, so it can also hit a rearguard. So in that case, it has some merit. But as seen as the Great Zero, I don't really think you're gonna run it. But as seen as it's a lot better in that case, I will give it 2 stars, as I see that it has more use than Hammerknuckle Dragon in that case. But as seen as this Great Zero, it's probably not gonna be run. Alright, next up we've got one of the ace cards from the trial deck, and that is Recklessness Dragon. And this is a very good card, because his skill, 1 of 2, is Auto Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. When placed, cost Counterblast 1. Choose a rearguard in your opponent's front row and bind it. So basically what Hammerknuckle Dragon does, only for 1 counterblast. Yeah, Hammerknuckle gets 5k, but here's the kicker. His other skills, Auto Rearguard Circle. When it attacks a Vanguard, if your opponent's front row has 1 or less rearguards, this unit gets power plus 3k until the end of that battle. So it becomes a 12k attacker when your opponent has only 1 rearguard or less in the front row. And as soon as it retired, it basically binds something when it's placed. You can fix that on the turn that you call it. So it's a very good first card, and it is very cost efficient. So I will give this one 4 stars, as it's a really great card in my opinion. Alright, another card from trial deck, and that is Access Streak Dragon. And his skill is Auto Rearguard Circle. When placed, cost Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1. Choose a rearguard in your opponent's front row and bind it. If you bind the rearguard, this unit gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. So for 1 Soul Blast more, you're gonna get 10k power instead of no power for what Recklessness Dragon can do. However, this card is a lot worse than the Recklessness Dragon in the case that it's an 8k body. And an 8k body isn't that great. Yeah, it makes itself an 18k when it gets the power, and it becomes 28k on an Axle circle in that case. Using Counterblast and Soul, I don't really see it worth it, so I will give it 3 stars, as you can use it, it has its options, it has its merits, but I don't think it will make the cut in the final build. So that's why I'll only give it 3 stars. Alright, next up we've got another trial deck card, and that is Photon Bomber Wyvern. And his skills act on Rearguard Circle, cost Counterblast 2, and this unit get power plus 5k until the end of turn. If your opponent has 1 or less rearguards in their front row, it gets plus 10k instead of plus 5k. Alright, just on the bat, it's a bad card. I will give this one 1 star. It's a grade 1. That uses 2 counterblasts, where everything already uses counterblast, so you don't really have that easy to gain counter charges. So 2 counterblasts already really bad, and it's just to get 5k and maybe 10k. Yeah, it's sorry, but that's just terrible. You're not gonna run this in any kind of build, so that's why I'll only give it 1 star for this card. Alright, next up we've got also a very, very strong grade 2, and that is Dragonic Deathscythe. And his skills, Auto Rearguard Circle. When placed, cost Soul Blast 2, so now it's a Soul Blast cost. Choose a rearguard in your opponent's front row, bind it, and this unit get power plus 3k until the end of turn. And his other skills, continuous rearguard circle. During the battle that it attacked the Vanguard, if there are no rearguards in your opponent's front row of the same column as this unit, this unit gets power plus 5k. Alright, right off the bat, his bind skill, basically his first skill is what Recklessness Dragon is in total. It can bind something and it can gain the 3k that Recklessness Dragon gains through his other skill. So that's, right there it's really good. And it uses souls, so you're not straining your counterblast for this card. But as seen as your souls also the way that you're going to countercharge, as you're going to see in a second, this might not really be that useful that this skill. But his other skill is really great. And this is the main reason I think you should run this in some decks, as it becomes a 14k attacker. As there is no unit in the same column as this one. And as seen as you're an Axel clan, you can basically make it a 24k attacker against most decks all the time. If you call this baby on the Axel circle against Protective Force, they cannot do anything. That second skill will always be active. Against another Axel player, they need to make 2 Axel circles and then call it on the second Axel circle. Otherwise they cannot make it, as seen as both players will place an Axel circle on the left side of them. So if your opponent rides to grade 3, their Axel circle isn't on your right side. So they're not in the same column. So they need to ride again to gain the Axel circle in your same column, and then only need to call it there to nullify his plus 5k. So for that, it's a really great card. And I will give it 4 stars, as seen as his retire is still useful in some scenarios, but mostly his 14k base make this card really strong. Alright, next up we've got another really strong card, and that is Detonix Dragon. And this is probably one of the main grade 3s you're gonna run in a lot of decks. And that's because of the following skills. Although Vanguard to Rearguard circle, when placed, cost counterblast 1. Choose a rearguard in your opponent's front row, bind it, and this unit get power plus 5k until the end of turn. So it's an on-place counterblast 1, bind something, and it also gets power, just like any other card, but it also works on a Vanguard circle. So whenever you pop this baby in the field, you shoot something a gone. But his other skill is going to make this card insane and synergizes so well with any other grade 3. And that is his second skill is Ouhou. When rode upon, call this card to the rearguard circle and one of your fingers gets power plus 10k until the end of the turn. So when you rode upon this thing, you can call to the rearguard circle and you can use its skill once again. His 10k on the next unit is basically a break ride in that matter, and it doesn't cost you anything. You might say that it costs a soul blast as seen you removing a card from the soul, but you will get a rearguard for it. So it's pretty good in my opinion, and especially in the Axel deck, as seen as drawing is a little bit issue and you want to generate as much rearguards as you can. And this is an excellent way to do that. So for that, I will give it 5 stars. But also what makes this card really great is the synergy with other grade 3s. Alright, next up we've got the special support grade 1 from the trial deck. And that is Lizard Soldier Riki. And his skill is Auto Vanguard to Rearguard circle. When placed, cost Soul Blast 1. And this unit gets power plus 3k until the end of turn. You may switch all of your opponent's rearguards between the front row and back row. They all move simultaneously. The center column does not move. So, because of the Vanguard, you cannot move the Vanguard to the back row. So basically what this card does is that the front row will become the back row and the back row will become the front row. Note that Axel circles will stay in place as soon as there is no front and back row to an Axel circle. So the rearguards on those circles cannot move. It's just the generic left and right column that every clan and deck has available to them. What really makes this card interesting is the fact that when your opponent has no back row, you can then empty their front row immediately by moving it to the back. Or you can snipe back row units if you want to retire their boosters and all those kinds of things. Personally, I'm not really that convinced about these kinds of skills, as seen as it doesn't really help you with anything besides maybe clearing out the front row, and it only works with specific cards that need that. But it doesn't retire anything, it doesn't really screw up with your opponent's field that much, as seen as the next turn they can just call it back to the front row, switch it off again. And it also costs resources in that matter, so I will give it 3 stars for now. Maybe it will be really great in combination with other cards, but as far as now, I am not really sold about these kinds of effects. Alright, next up we've got another card from trial deck that has a similar skill, and that is Duress Dragon. His skill is Auto Rearguard circle. When placed, choose up to one of your opponent's rearguards and move it to another rearguard circle in the same column as that unit. And this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of turn. Alright, I'm gonna be honest, this is a really terrible card. It's a grade 3 with an Axel circle, but it has a rearguard skill, and also the rearguard skill is similar to Riki, but only for 1 unit. And that's about it. It does gain 5k, but it's a grade 3, and your grade 3s are really important in this deck, so I will give it 1 star, as I think nobody is gonna run this card. We also got a grade 2 of this card, and that is Tempestuous Domineering Wyvern. And his skill is auto rearguard circle. When placed, choose up to one of your opponent's rearguards and move it to another open rearguard circle in the same column as that unit. If you could not choose, this unit get power plus 3k until the end of turn. Alright, so basically it has the same skill. You can move one rearguard to either the front row or back row, depending on where it is. And if you could not, if they have no rearguard that you can select that can move to an open rearguard circle, it will become a 12k attacker, basically. And it's really not that great, so I will give it 2 stars, but it's still terrible in a lot of ways, and I don't think you're really gonna run this card. Alright, next we're gonna talk about cards that benefit from an empty opponent's field, or at least an empty front row. And the one that's gonna lead this pack is Thunderstorm Dragoon, the 10k vanilla. And this time it's a 9k, of course. And his skill is continuous rearguard circle. During your turn, if your opponent has 1 or less rearguard in their front row, this unit gets power plus 5k. So it becomes a 14k generic beatstick. That's pretty fine. The only downside to this is when your opponent can keep flooding the board, it will become a 9k that does nothing. So it depends on how the game goes. This can be a really good card. So I'll give it 3 stars for that. As in some scenarios this thing can really hit hard, in other cases it doesn't. But at the same time, your grade 2s, you're gonna use them to clear out the field, and this one doesn't do that. Next up, we've got another grade 3, and it is Beathawk Dragon. And his skill is continuous Vanguard the rearguard circle. During your turn, if there are no rearguards in your opponent's front row, this unit gets power plus 10k. This is a very interesting skill. When you place it on the axial circle, it's basically a Riptide in some sense, but Riptide will gain even more power in that, so it's a little bit weaker, but unlike Riptide and the other cards that are similar to that, this one is very hard to get off, as seen as you probably only will get it 1 turn to clear out your opponent's field, and then it will gain plus 10k, and then about it, then you probably don't have the resources anymore to keep clearing out their front row. And as seen as a grade 3, that then becomes a 12k vanilla. It also doesn't have the axial marker, and it doesn't really do anything besides that. I will give it 2 stars, as it might have an impact on 1 turn, and it can be a very strong impact. The 10k can make a difference, that doesn't cost you anything, but besides that it doesn't really do anything, and it might not fit the decks. Alright, now we're going to come to the big boss monster of the trial deck, and that is Great Composure Dragon. And it has a very interesting skill, and that skill is auto Vanguard the rearguard circle. At the beginning of your opponent's battle phase, this unit gets power plus 3k until the end of turn for each open rearguard circles in your opponent's front row. If it's your turn, it gets power plus 5k instead of the plus 3k. And this is very interesting, as seen this is a very defensive card in an aggro deck. As if you can keep clearing your opponent's field, this card will become stronger. And this is an even better card against Axel, as seen as against Force. It can potentially only be plus 6, so it can become an 18k. But Force and Protect cards are probably going to call units to the field. That also helps out, as seen as they're now forced to call cards to the field from the hand to lower this guy's power. So there's also a merit to that one. But against Axel, this thing can really spiral out of control. If they have 1 or 2 Axel circles and you clear everything out, they need to call 4 cards to the field. Otherwise this thing has plus 12k, and that makes them 24. And not a lot of Axel cards can then deal with that number. That's insane to think about it. So against Axel, this is insane. And in your own turn, that can potentially be plus 10 against Force and Protect, and plus 20, maybe 20, 25 against Axel clans. And that's a lot for nothing, actually. And this is also a very good card that synergizes with Riki, as you can then force your opponent's units in normal circles back to the back row, so you don't have to clear them out if you don't have the complete resources to fill their field. So Riki really works well with this card. And I will give Great Composure Dragon 4 stars. I see this is a very interesting card, and it works with the problem that Axel has to deal with, that your opponent can just sit back with cards in hand. This card forces your opponent to call cards to the field, otherwise they will have a problem to deal with this thing. Alright, the next card is Demolition Dragon, and his skill is continuous rearguard circle. If there are no rearguards in your opponent's front row, this unit gets plus 3k. So it becomes an 11k booster. And 11k booster is also pretty nice, as seen as your 12k base. So together you will become a 23k column on your Vanguard attack. And against Force, That's perfect. So that's a very nice effect. This other effect is interesting as seen as other Vanguard circle. When an attack hits the Vanguard, draw a card. So it's similar to the grade 1 that we had in Gear Chronicle. That it only works when it's the grade 1 and it attacks the Vanguard when it attacks hits while it's on the Vanguard circle. And at first I really didn't like these effects, but then after some digging around and talking with a lot of people online, it's basically the way to help fixing the issue when you went second. And when you went second with Axel, you probably are falling behind very quickly. This card can fix that as it gives pressure when you went second. If you went first, you already have the pressure of the initiative. And this card can turn it around when you don't have that initiative. So it fixes an issue with that. And that's very interesting and I like that actually. So I will give this card 4 stars for that, as seen as it makes a great booster. And it can help you with when you went second, and it helps basically get some initiative back on your opponent. Alright, next up we've got another card, and that is Dragon Dancer Regina. And her skill is act on rearguard circle. When your opponent has 1 or less rearguards in the front row, cast, put the unit into your soul, and 3 of your rearguards get power plus 5k until the end of turn. Alright, this is a great skill. It goes in soul, and we need soul in Narukami, and it also gives 3 units 5k. So that's pretty good. The only downside what I have with this card is that it basically goes into soul, so you're gonna minus on your field. And Narukami doesn't really have any plus engine, so it might become a problem down the road. And also I'm very interested, I'm still looking around if it has fit in the deck. I think it has potential to be in the deck, but not at a very high count. So for that I will give it 3 stars, as it's a nice deck options. It can fix numbers, it can potentially also go into your soul, so it can also help you with resources. So it's a pretty good all-around card. And you basically need some waifu in the deck with all these dragons. I mean, we don't have Anastasia anymore, so yeah. Alright, now we're getting to the cards that have a direct effect with binding, and they will get an advantage effect when you're binding cards. And the one that's gonna lead this set of cards is Dusty Plasma Dragon. And his skill is auto rearguard circle once per turn. When your opponent's rearguard is bound during your turn, you may give 2 of your rearguards in the same column as this unit plus 5k power. This card basically is an extra axle circle that you're gonna generate. As seen as when you have 2 rearguards in the same column as this unit, you will give 5k to the front row, 5k to the back row, and that's plus 10k on this entire column. So that's the same power you will get from an axle circle. You're not gonna call this thing to the axle circle, as that's pretty wasteful, as sure it becomes a 24k attacker, but it has more value when you put it on the normal rearguard circle in the front row, as you then get 2 units plus 5k. But besides, it doesn't really do anything besides that, and when you're running out of resources, it becomes 9k vanilla. So it has its issues, and you need to keep tempoing out if you want to keep getting value of this card. So I will give it 3 stars, as seen as early game it can be really good, but late game where you don't have the resource anymore, and if you draw it late game, it's just a dead card that doesn't really do anything from that point on. Alright, next up we've got the counter charge that I was referring to, and that's Lightning of Hope, Helena. And her skills auto rearguard circle once per turn when your opponent's rearguard is bound during your turn. If you have no face-up cards in your damage zone, cast Soul Blast 1 and counter charge 1. Alright, I will not go really in depth about this card in general. I've done a video about all the different counter charges engines that each different clan got, while also I'm debating of why Royal Paladin didn't get one. And I also went into a little bit in depth about this card from Narukami, links on top, of why it was limited in the way that it is. And basically, Narukami gets so much value out of binding your opponent's rearguards. You don't want to have an easy way of countering, and they already gave Kagero a very limited one, but the way that Narukami affects it, it needs to be limited even more. And that's why this card is very restricted. You need to bind something, so it probably are gonna cost you Counterblast, unless you're using Deathscythe. But, in combination with Deathscythe, this also uses Soul Blast to generate a Counterblast, and you need to have no face-up cards in your damage zone, so you cannot generate more counter charges on top of each other. You cannot do that. So it's a very limited card in that sense. But it will have its place, as seen as a lot of cards use Counterblast. So I will give it 3 stars for now. As I don't think it's a very good counter charger. It is basically the best that we got. Alright, the last card that I want to talk about that again benefits from these binding effects. And it's probably one of my favorite cards, especially as seen as the mythical beast Phoenix is one of my favorite mythical animals. And of course, now that you know that, you know that I'm referring to Rising Phoenix. And this card is insane! And this can make Narukami basically BS in some scenarios. And the reason why that is because of its skill. Although on drop zone. So that's a very interesting one. When your opponent's rearguard is bound during your turn, you may call this card to the rearguard circle. If you do, this unit gets plus 3k power. So it becomes 11k attacker or 11k booster for free. Every time that you bind something, so for Counter Blast 1 or Soul Blast 2, you can get a rearguard, but not one. If you have 4 of them in the drop zone, you will get 4 new rearguards. And as stated before, Axel want to get as much as rearguards as they can throughout any means possible. This thing is an answer to the problem Axel players. And when you have a lot of rearguards to the field and they don't want to give you counterblast, they're gonna destroy all your rearguards. And then you can really do nothing, as soon as you have no cards in hand, you have no counterblast, you have nothing. If you have at least 1 counterblast left and they destroy all your rearguards, you attack with your finger, you bind something, and 4 of these babies come back and you can attack with them. It's insane. It also works with the VR that you can multi-attack for crazy. You can have a full field, this thing 4 times on your drop zone, attack with everything, then attack with your finger, bind something, call 4 of these things on top of your other rearguards, and then you can attack 4 times with those. That's insane to think about. So it's a pretty good card, and that's why I will definitely give it 5 stars. It fixes a lot of problems, and your opponent can just keep attacking into it, and you keep calling it back. Against Shadow Paladin, you can choose which you retire. Alright, Phoenix retires, next turn, bind, and Phoenix is back. Basically the answer to your problems for a lot of decks, and this is a really great card in my opinion, and I think it's a 4 off in every deck. I don't see why you shouldn't run 4 cards. It's free cards, free rearguards. I mean, who doesn't want free rearguards? So now that we've talked about Rising Phoenix, it's time to talk about the big boss monster of the deck, and that is their VR, and that is none other than Detonix Dragon. And oh boy, this thing is insane, because his skill is auto and Vanguard circle, once per turn. When it attacks the Vanguard, cost counterblast 1, choose a rearguard in your opponent's front row and bind it. Then, cost discard the same number of cards from your hand as the number of your opponent's rearguards, and at the end of the battle, stand this unit, and it gets power plus 5k and drive minus 1. So it's, in generic sense, it's a Ziegenberg, but it also can outbind something, so it's in some cases stronger than a Ziegenberg, but it has less power. But if we combine it with Detonix Sting Dragon, it will gain plus 10k for both attacks. So it becomes 22 on the first and 27 on the second. And that's really great in combination by the synergy between these 2 cards. But also the synergy with Rising Phoenix, for example. As soon as it binds on attack, and just like I told with Rising Phoenix, you can then call them mid-battle 4 new rearguards if you have 4 in drop zone. So you can attack with your rearguards, then attack with this thing, and then call 4 new things in the front row circles, your axle circles and whatnot, and then call an attack again. I think this card is definitely 5 stars, as it multi-attacks, it enables a lot of potential plays, and it's just a strong card on its own. And it also forces your opponents to call cards to the field, which you then can retire. So it also fixes that problem. Now, usually I will end it by this, with the VR, but I have one special card. It's just a common, but I'm very interested in this skill effect, and I want to highlight it on the end of the video, and that is, of course, none other than Scattering Electric Spear Ramzi. And the reason why it's an interesting card in my opinion is because of its skill, and that is auto rearguard circle, at the end of the battle that it boosts the Vanguard. If there are no rearguards in your opponent's front row, cost counterblast 2 and put this unit into your soul and stand one of your rearguards. Alright, so the reason why I find it interesting is because you can do a combination play with your VR and any kind of rearguard that is powerful, so maybe your grade 3 or a 24k Dragonic Deathscythe for that example, and you can do the old school Tidal Assault crit play. So what I mean with this is, you have this thing behind your Vanguard, and you first attack with your Vanguard unboosted, and you will get a crit, for example. You put the crit onto the rearguard, and then the Vanguard restand. Then after that, you're not going to attack with your Vanguard second attack. You're going to first attack with that rearguard with the crit against your opponent for a high number. If you got the crit, you're probably also going to put power on it, so it becomes 14, 24, 34 with a crit probably. They need to deal with that. Then you attack with the Vanguard once again with this thing, and then you use its skill to restand that rearguard. And then you attack once again with a strong power rearguard with a crit. So in this case, you basically made the old school Tidal Assault restanding crit play on a strong, powerful rearguard. it does cost you 2 counterblasts, so in total with the Vanguard it probably is 3 counterblasts. But you also gain a soul, as the Zenith goes into the soul. But you have a lot of pressure against your opponent. And that makes it very interesting in my opinion. And I think it's something to think about. I don't think it's an outright 4 or 5 star card. I will give it 3 stars for that. It's very specific in its use, as sure you get an extra restanding rigor, but if you combine it quite well, it can be very deadly. So in my opinion, it might be a card to think about. So that's why I wanted to highlight at the end of this video, as seen as it invites a new gameplay that we have seen actually from a completely different deck in a very old era. So with that we talked about every card. We've seen a lot of interesting skills for Narukami, a lot of binding cards, a lot of cards that enables extra effects to switch columns so you can bind back runes. Also cards that benefit from binding. But more importantly, we've seen a VR that can restand and get all kinds of crazy interaction with all your other cards. And I think Narukami is looking pretty good for in my personal opinion. It's still an Excel deck and everybody knows what kind of position Excel decks are currently in. But I think it's a really good deck and also looks really fun to play. So I'm definitely gonna pick this one up after this set drops, and I will hope to do a lot of match videos with this deck in particular on this channel. And I think that covers everything that I wanted to cover for Narukami in this video. Leave in the comments down below what you guys think of this set and basically your opinions of all the cards, and maybe add something more information that I talked about the cards, maybe like for Riki for example, that I'm still on the fence about those cards. So give your opinion on those cards. Maybe you can sway me in one direction. That's basically the reason why we're doing this video. So we can open up the discussion to which cards might be good, which cards aren't really that good, and all those kind of good stuff. So if you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Liking the video, subscribe to the channel, hitting the bell button to be updated to videos and all those good stuff. And of course, we're doing a lot more videos on this topic, as seen as we still got 2 more clans to talk about of the Miyaji Academy Cardfight Club. And that one is probably one of the interesting clans, that is Numatama. But we still also had to cover about Gold Paladin with their new Azel support. So tune in tomorrow when we go over Azel. So I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.